Welcome to the Hopevale podcast. We're in the midst of a sermon series right now called Voter Guide, where we're looking at what kingdom allegiance looks like in a divided world. We believe that our faith should inform the other parts of our life, including our approach to politics. So right now we're answering your questions about the current sermon series as you all wrestle with what kingdom allegiance looks like right now. My name is Nate Murray. I'm the executive pastor here at Hopevale, and I'm joined today by our senior pastor, Josh Pardee.
Hello.
Along with his wife, Brandy.
Hi.
Hello, friends.
Hello, hello.
Mm-hmm.
Good to see you all. You had I'm turning into a fan club now, but just a phenomenal message yesterday. I really feel like it was a kind of a cornerstone moment for us as a church. I don't know. I feel like this is a message we're going to be revisiting in the future. So really excited to get into it, but I want to start with kind of a general question for us to break the ice together. Part of your message we'll talk about is about our distractions and what's distracting us from kingdom allegiance. So I wanted to start with just what is your favorite distraction? Distractions aren't always bad. Sometimes we need distractions. So what are y'all's favorite distractions?
Right now, mine is probably, I love football season. It's an easy way to be distracted. It's nice that it's one game a week. You can hop into the storylines that you want for college or pro or whatever. There's all sorts of media outlets now, so you can find your little niche kind of like voices that you like to listen to. And yeah, so if I have time to like dive into something, it's usually I'm listening to something about that or hopping on social media, and there's certain accounts I like to follow and see what they're saying about different teams or different takes. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's me.
Brandy, do you have any favorite distractions?
It was a good question. Unfortunately, I would have to be honest that usually the quickest thing is whatever's going on with my phone.
Yeah.
So maybe scrolling or responding to things or listening to something. But if I am in the middle of like a good book or a puzzle, sometimes there are like seasons where, it's like diving into that, or maybe planning or organizing something if I'm in the middle of that too.
Okay.
I'm happy to let go of some other responsibilities or house things or whatever if I can put my energy.
Project.
Yeah.
I do not enjoy planning and organizing our home. It's not one of my favorite distractions.
Sounds like work.
Yeah. But I totally understand that.
What is yours outside of the Boston Celtics?
Outside of the Celtics?
Yeah.
The Celtics are not a distraction. The Celtics are a way of life. Now, my wife also enjoys a good puzzle. That's been a Michigan thing since we moved to Michigan. In the winter, she'll take part of the dining area and work on a puzzle for a while. Yep. And then she also started doing paint by numbers. Yep. And she's enjoyed those. I got her a couple of those to prepare for winter for her birthday here recently. For me, I think a healthy distraction for me is getting out of the house and getting outside. So I'll go just sit at the state park in Bay City sometimes if I want to clear my head, if I want some distractions. Or then on trips, we love trips that involve getting outside and seeing creation. That's a good distraction for me. Yeah. At home, like video games can be a distraction. And I don't like super intense stuff. I need something just intense for me to not have to think about it.
Sure.
Those are some of my favorite ones.
Yeah.
But the Celtics are a wonderful distraction too.
And they're good right now, so that's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they've been historically good for as long as I can remember. But anyway, the message, man, I think at least for me, maybe the most challenging message of this series for me personally, just listening to it, especially listening to it again a second time. You talked about how we get distracted by different things, and right now specifically this election and whatever camp you find yourself in, maybe the obsession over that distracting us from what Jesus is doing in the kingdom. So I wanted to break it down into like practical terms and thinking through those things we're distracted by. For some people, might not be the election, it might be other things, but what are some evidences from y'all's point of view that we're living or maybe being distracted by fragile, temporary, worldly kingdoms instead of being focused on the kingdom of Jesus? How does that show up in our life? So not specifically what are the distractions, but if you're doing a gut check, like, wait a second, am I being distracted? What are some evidences maybe that you are being distracted? What do y'all think?
I mean, this is just me personally. I think if I start moving into like fear or anxiety or like despair or just overwhelmed by the world, and that can look like thinking about the whole world. That can look like thinking about work. That can look like thinking about family. I mean, it can manifest in different areas for sure. But I think that, at least for me, there's this way to kind of get stuck in these cycles of just kind of going over all of the same questions and thoughts and information. And then the reality is I miss out on what's right in front of me, right? I miss out on the opportunity of what God is doing. So if God is always present and he's always at work, then I think part of the distraction is in my life is when I move out of that reality. And there is time to move out in the sense of like thinking about the world and understanding. So obviously there'd be a bit of a distinction there, but I think when you get so flustered and caught up by different voices and, narratives and meta narratives in our world. And I do think, as we're in this series in Voter Guide of thinking about specifically political commentary that is everywhere right now, that's what happens. And people, I mean, I see it on maybe social media is the way we see this most clearly, because we all do have access. That is such an easy distraction for us, and we can hop on there and you see people who are just constantly living in that world, right? And so again, not that it's not important, it is, but I think, at least for myself, and maybe I would encourage people to think about their own lives of what are they missing out when they continue to linger there longer than they should. So it comes to mind. For
sure. Brandy, what do you think?
Yeah, for myself, I think it's when I start to get into like a production mentality or performance mentality or efficiency mentality, that becomes more important than the person right in front of me or being present with my kids. And usually that will come out in my impatience or my frustration with myself or with others. I think of, not listening well to others or being easily offended, or when it's about me and mine and kind of this protection mode of whether it's my time or my way or me being right or my schedule. These are just some of the things for myself that I know I can get caught up in instead of, I think we're getting to that, but slowing down or pausing in the moment, and like Josh was saying, being present to what God is doing, or I think back just to even like listening well to one another and holding space for each other. That takes a posture and perspective that's different. It's not usually this societal or culture that we live in.
I think, as I was thinking about it, when my thoughts are centered on me, then I'm usually distracted. And when I process everything through, what does this mean for me? Why don't they understand me?
Right.
When I become the center of my thoughts, that's when I've usually gotten distracted. When instead I'm like, I wonder why they think that. I wonder what led them to that point. I wonder why they're acting the way they are. I wonder, it's that curiosity that we've talked about multiple times. That's when I tend to be focused in the right way. But when it's like, how dare they do that to me?
Right.
Or why don't they listen to me? Or whatever those thoughts might be, that's when I know I'm off track. And I know, like, I jumped into Galatians 5 and was comparing the fruit of the Spirit, which we're very familiar with. We just had a message series about that not too long ago. And then just in general, a lot of people can rattle off, that are believers, can rattle off the fruit of the Spirit off the top of their head. But what Paul does is he contrasts that with the acts of the flesh, or even some people might call it the fruit of the flesh before that. And the interesting thing with that fruit of the flesh is a lot of the time we get hung up on the more extreme parts, because it talks about sexual immorality and some things like that.
Sure.
But in that list are so many things that we've really been preaching against, right, during this series: hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, and envy. Like, if that's not the 2024 presidential election process, I don't know what it is. So it's just interesting the way sometimes with just a little bit of perspective, you can look and see what the forces of this world are doing to try to distract us.
Yep.
And when you read a list like that, you're like, oh my gosh, that is totally the fruit of the flesh. And it doesn't mean that there's not good people in that process that are running for office, they're doing other things.
Right.
Politics, you've done a good job of helping us understand, are not inherently evil.
Sure.
But certainly we can get distracted by them. And I think you guys mentioned it, but the list that I wrote down was just like, if you're constantly offended right now, if you find yourself just in a constant state of offense, if you're endlessly frustrated. I remember, I think it was my dad at one point said, if everybody in your life is a jerk, you're the jerk. You know? So like, if you're going through life and like everything is offending me, everything is frustrating me, I have self-work to do, right? Where the problem is not with everybody else that's around me, it's with me. So if you flip that, then what does it look like if we as believers lived instead for Jesus's unshakable eternal kingdom? So we talked about the evidences that we're focused in the wrong place, that we're distracted. What are some of the evidences that we're focused on the right thing? We're focused on the kingdom no matter what else is going on around us. What do y'all think?
Well, I mean, the opposite immediately is going to be the fruit of the Spirit, right? So, and we hammer on those regularly. Another one I go to often is Sermon on the Mount. I mean, the entire Sermon on the Mount, but maybe even a bullet point list of that is the Beatitudes. And then I think it is the small, like, I think the kingdom a lot of times is the small work that we participate in. I think the kingdom is when we gather around the table together. I think it is when we give voice to those who don't have a voice. I think it is when we're conscious and working towards freeing those who are marginalized. I think it is living into the way of love over fear. I mean, there's just a million different things that we could do right now that I think those are the small, faithful steps of the kingdom. And I think that is the key to it, is it's living in this posture of faith or faithfulness, we could say, and trusting in the long game. And I think that's the thing with God too, so part of why we get so heightened during this moment in our lives is because, and I alluded to a bit yesterday, we think this is the election, this is the end all be all. And I don't know, people make different cases. There's compelling cases if it is or isn't or whatever. But I want to keep zooming out and go, okay, so what do we know about who God is? Because that's going to shape who we are and how we understand our world. God is the God who creates the world good and gives it to his image bearers to rule. That is not a God who right off the beginning is concerned with efficiency. And that story continues throughout the entire rest of the arc of Scripture. Mankind messes up creation. So God continues to, for thousands of years, try and help lead them back to him. They can't get there. So then God comes, not in efficiency again, but as God in the flesh. And he comes not as a king, but he comes as, and not in a palace, but as a baby in a manger, right? And so, and then he grows up and he rejects all of the earth's political power because he can't be contained by the political power. Like that's part of why the disciples are so disoriented in the rest of the world, because they even why he's executed partially, right, is because, I mean, the sign above his head is he's king of the Jews, right? Like they're mocking him. What they don't seem to understand, and that you and I also even today can get caught up in, is we're looking for Jesus to reign and rule like all of the other leaders and rulers in our world do, and this is not how he does it. So again, I would go back to, as we were in this series, to the upper room, where he gives us this picture of this is what power looks like. This is how you live. This is how the power of God works. It works under. It's not this power over. So I take all of that to say, I think there's this slow, patient work where Jesus even models for us that it is about living into faithfulness. And because Jesus didn't, we find by the time we get to Philippians that he's the name that is going to be exalted above all names, that every knee is going to bow to him, every tongue is going to confess. And so that's like our model. That's what we're imaging our lives after. And so I think once we get to that point, at least for me, it becomes a lot freer because it feels like I have to control a lot less, and I just have to be faithful. And that feels manageable, maybe attainable. Like I can do that. And the good news is that's all that's being asked of me. I don't actually need to take more power or control. I just need to trust in Jesus and his way. So
What do you think, Brandy? What are some evidences that you're living into the kingdom?
Yeah. I think a big one for me is that we're able to be humble and gentle and marked by love. And that's going to come from a deep place of identity. And just like Josh was saying, trusting that we can be confident and resolute in a humble posture that God is faithful, and also that nothing can shake our identity and who we are in Jesus. And so that means that we can enter into hard conversations. That means that we can serve others, and it's not it's not taking a hit on our identity or on who we are. Other words that come to mind I wrote out was like peace and living even in harmonious relationships, which doesn't mean like fake or inauthentic. I actually think that means, willing to listen deeply and pursue reconciliation and try and understand our differences and still love in spite of those things. Needs being met amongst one another and in our community.
As y'all are talking, I'm reminded of just this idea that when we live independent from God, that sin has this way of twisting us inward and isolating us, where the Spirit has this way of healing and restoring and untwisting us outward, where all of a sudden our hearts are more open, we engage with others. Our view, again, like we already said, is not me, me, me. Instead, it's what is Jesus doing and who is it that he's drawing into himself and into the Father. I think you guys are both describing a picture of that as I hear you both talk. It's really beautiful. I loved the section about our real voting. Just loved it. Loved that people got to see you passionate and see a little picture of your heart in that moment, because that's just who I've grown to know you to be. But this idea of our real voting, I think, is an amazing challenge to us, because by the time most people hear this, they've either already voted or, the election may even be over. I don't know by the time they hear this. So I love the idea of our real voting begins now, like the election's going to be over and we can begin to actually vote with our lives, which I love that. Kind of to help people understand that, can you guys think of a time where you were voting for the wrong thing with your life? Does that make sense? Where we want people to vote for the kingdom with their life. So sometimes the best way, at least the way my brain works, is to figure out how not to do it so that you know how to do it. So is there a time in your life that you can share that you realized you were voting for the wrong thing?
I mean, I think it's a constant check-in of like, am I voting for the right thing? If voting, and by that, just to reiterate, voting means how I'm living my life 24/7. It's way beyond just
what am I embodying? That's another word we
way
use
beyond
a lot,
what I'm filling in a ballot. I said that was a way of, that's like 1/1000th of how I think about voting. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a constant check-in of, okay, so are the things that I'm living into, pressing into right now, are they the way of the kingdom or are they not? I mean, I think there's been moments even as a pastor or as a dad or as a husband or as a friend where it's very tempting, and for sure have given into this idea of even using the ways of the kingdoms of this world to try and get the results of the kingdom of God, right? And we already talked about earlier in this season, you can't have the truth of Jesus without the way of Jesus, right? And so I for sure have moments where it's, okay, fear would be a really effective lever to pull right now to get this desired outcome, right?
Yep.
And I think that's, for me, that's a lot of what it comes down to of when I think about how I'm voting and whether I'm voting faithfully or not. It comes down to desired outcomes and getting people to where I want them to be. And if that becomes my primary thing, then I'm likely to start voting in the wrong way. I'm likely to start pulling levers that are of the kingdoms of this world. So for me, it's always checking in on that and being willing to come open-handed, surrendering the results of where things are going to land. And that's really hard. Like, I don't even just say that theoretically. Like, there's a lot riding on results in my life, whether it's being a dad or being a husband or being a neighbor or being a boss or being, so how do I continue to try and live in a posture where I'm inviting people to see the kingdom, participate in the kingdom? I'm attempting to announce the kingdom with my words and then live into it myself to give them a picture, but then not kind of like grabbing it more strongly than that and like holding on and then like trying to force people into it, but just demonstrating it and allowing people to see, is this something that you want?
Right.
And I think that that's what we see Jesus do over and over again. Like, if we're going to look at Jesus' life and how he votes, he's constantly doing that. And so some people are receiving the good news that he has. Some people are rejecting the good news he has. And some people want him killed because of the good news that he has. So that's the pattern that I would want to live my life, and how I would think about, yeah, for sure, there are times where I'm not voting the right way because I'm not living into the kingdom.
What do you think, Brandy?
Yeah. I think I can think back. I mean, not that I still don't do this, but there's definitely some seasons in my life where my need to be right felt pretty strong. And maybe definitely where I hurt relationships or people because that was more important, that my way was right, or this belief or this whatever, that caused tension in the relationship. Or even, I think, maybe holding something so strongly that it minimizes other people's experience, or not meeting them where they're at, or an empathy that I can look back on and see, that I don't know that was the way that Jesus would have met them in that moment. And it was more about me feeling secure and thinking that I needed to hang on to that or make that known.
That's really good.
In a way that was probably unhelpful.
Can I push into that a little bit?
Sure.
Since you shared that. This idea of like in the moment wanting to be right. I think that is, I think we all do that. So I want to push into that. So if I'm in that, so let's say I'm in a disagreement with a spouse or a friend or a sibling or something like that, a parent. If I'm in a disagreement, how do I pull myself out of that? Because if I'm aimed at temporary, like fragile kingdoms of this world, in that moment, I want to be right at any cost, right? So how do I stop that train and instead refocus myself on what Jesus is doing instead? Do you have any tricks, any thoughts?
Well, already I can like feel myself needing to take a deep breath, even as you're talking. Like, okay, let's just pause.
Right.
But honestly, I mean, something that it was just the work of God, and it came to mind right now, and that was part of Josh's sermon. But years ago, I think there was a relational conflict. And I had a wise mentor who brought the passage from Joshua to mind and just said to me, like, here we see the angel of the Lord say, like, when Joshua asks, whose side are you on? And he says, neither. And she was kind of challenging me to say, like, actually, I think you both are right and you both are wrong, and God loves you both dearly, and he's on both of your sides and he's on neither of your sides. And really, it's not about who's right or whose side God is on or who needs to win in this. And I feel like that helped broaden my imagination and give me a bigger perspective of, oh, wow, okay, it's actually not about this person understanding what I think is right or how it should be done or embracing my way of XYZ. And really, I was in the wrong for how I was, not loving them well by my words and my actions,
really good.
and clinging so tightly that I wasn't leaning into the ways of Jesus. Maybe I thought I was really proclaiming this truth of Jesus that I thought was so important, but I was doing more harm in that. And it helped me, just come back to the elevation of, we are both dearly loved by God, created in his image. He has good for both of us. And we might see this differently. And I can still love well and listen well and calm down a little bit.
Wow. So, in theory, what you're saying is there can be two groups of people who have deep convictions about something, believe with all of their heart that they're right, and they can be in opposition to one another. And in that, God could be for both of them at the same time, even though they're disagreeing with each other. That's like an amazing message for us to hear during an
not
election.
Could be, is.
Yeah.
Definitely is for.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
I was saying it kind of tongue in cheek.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I know. I know what you're doing. I'm just clarifying for everyone. It's not even. I don't want to leave that part up to question. Like I get the humor. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really good. Thank you for sharing that specific thing, Brandy. So we've become distracted, a lot of us, by this election cycle, by maybe a variety of other things too. But I love a lot of what you said yesterday, and kind of summing it up might be, we've become distracted, but Jesus has not stopped working to draw people near to the Father. So as we're distracted by any variety of things, Jesus is kind of single-minded, and he's always working. He's always working to draw people to the Father. So I wanted us to practice that together. So let's together in this moment think through the ways Jesus is at work. So I wanted to ask both of you, and I definitely have thoughts myself, but just what are some ways you see Jesus on the move right now in our own church and in this community?
I've seen it we're currently teaching our Monday night Apprenticing Jesus class, and it's been really cool to see people desiring to go deeper and are hungering for just spiritual and emotional maturity and growing and hearing God's voice, which is just really sweet and beautiful. And then personally, I've just been witnessing God at work, desiring to bring greater freedom in people's lives. And so them growing in their true identity, them walking in new freedom as they are healed of some past constructs or hurts or different things like that. And just, coming alive like right before my eyes, which has been really beautiful.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely go there. I think for me, the way I always like to see the kingdom at work is in like the small things. I mean, they're really big and important things, but it's usually not big sweeping movements. It's all of the conversations that I know right now that are happening about people with their marriages and trying to figure that out. It's people who are becoming awake to the things of God and what he's doing in their life and have a hunger for that in a way that they haven't been. Like, some people are just on fire. We can't give them enough resources right now to satiate them, sort of a thing. I think it's the stories of the people who are stepping in and trusting, what does it look like to know my neighbor by name and need, who are telling those stories. I have been sitting with our worship team before service for the past few weeks, and I've been asking them the question, where have you seen God at work? And that's been really fun, just to see a whole collective, small things, but I mean, always personal to their life, right? And how God is fleshing out different things that we're talking about as a church, or things that they've been wrestling with, how they're seeing God provide, or so I don't know. There's just, I feel like there's so many different faithful stories of people who are capturing a vision of what the kingdom is, how to live into that, and are graciously going about in their life, again, not like forcing anyone into it, but just declaring, hey, like this, there's hope here. There's good news for you. Like you get to come be a part of it. And so, I mean, I don't know. I feel like every day I'm hearing a different story of someone else who's brought their friend to church that they've been praying for quite some time, or finally got to invite them, or I've met so many different people in the lobby that is the case over the past several weeks. So that's always exciting.
I've heard of a lot of kids and like students, like in the youth too, just where questions are stirring, and in increasing measure, people are saying yes to Jesus, and it's beautiful to see as they're processing and asking questions. And
yeah, I think there's a lot to be excited about. There's obvious things like lots of new faces, and we get to celebrate baptism here in a couple of weeks, and that's going to be a lot of fun to see people taking that step in their journey. We have a worship pastor search going on right now, and we have a search consultant. His name is Rocky, from Slingshot Group, who's helping us with that search. And he was here this last weekend. And sometimes it's nice to have an outside perspective on what you're dealing with every single day, because there's things that we take for granted and things we get used to. And it was really encouraging. We did kind of a debrief, he and I, right before he left. And it was really interesting to hear his excitement that he, being in our services, having interacted with a lot of our leaders and stakeholders, he's just excited. He's excited about our church and what's happening here, and believes that there is a stirring going on, and that there are exciting opportunities ahead of us. And so that was really encouraging to hear that. And then I think I've thought a lot recently. I read this line in a book that it's not a new idea, but the way they worded it was really good. Just that rescued people rescue people. And I think if I had to put like a summation on what I see from my seat, is I see a lot of people realizing they've been rescued, which is really exciting to me, because once they realize they've been rescued, they're going to reach out to rescue others too. So I think that's exciting to me, to see a amazing group of people begin to realize, wait a second, we've been rescued. And some of them are remembering it. They knew it. Maybe it wasn't front of mind for whatever reason, but then there's new people coming in that are like, oh my gosh, this God that tells this story in Scripture, part of the story is that he rescued me. Yeah. And that's incredible. Yeah. Because I do think when we realize that, that's when all kinds of amazing things begin to happen. Yeah. One of the things that you talked about in this vein is to live more present. And I love that idea. You talked about that quite a bit in the sermon. But what are some practical ways, like rubber to the road, like super practical, not general, but specific ways that we can be more present in our community? Y'all have any thoughts there?
I think we could slow down, or I could. I'll speak for myself. Yeah. Whether that's talking with our neighbors or coworkers or the parents that I'm sitting next to in the bleachers, just, wherever you are, being present, asking questions, getting to know one another, and then whatever that looks like, you have to be able to give time, but to open up your home, or to open up your schedule, or to, give of yourself in that way. And one other thing that came to mind with that is the whole idea of the footnotes, which we talked about yesterday in the sermon too. And a friend recently just reminded me, with the stage and age of our kids, as she said, realistically, you have like 10 years left, especially with our oldest. And so if you were to envision in 10 years, what you want your relationship to be, or who you want to be as a mom, or what important things, it just made me think of that end note stuff of like, what literally is going to be the end notes that really actually doesn't matter right now, and what in the present moment do I want to give my time and attention and affection to, and that I feel like is maybe a good practice to sit with. Maybe, what are things maybe that I need to let go of, that maybe are more things of this world, or maybe don't need to take front and center place. And Jesus, help shift my gaze for what you want me to be present to.
It's really good.
To be clear, I said footnotes, not endnotes.
Oh, yeah.
And no, I'm not correcting you, but it's because I loathe endnotes.
That's right. I'm sorry. Thank you for the correction.
They are not of the kingdom of God.
Yes, explain why, because now everyone's going to have a question about this.
Because footnotes are at the bottom of when you're reading and you're sourcing material, they put it at the bottom of the page.
Which is
you
helpful.
Can see right there. Endnotes send you all the way back to the back of the book, and you have to go find what chapter you're in.
They are annoying.
Number 37. Who would organize a book that way? I don't understand. So
yes,
footnotes, not not endnotes.
Footnotes. What are going to
Thank
be
you
the
for that
footnotes of our life?
No, I think all that's great. I think as far as how do we be more present, I think slowing down. I think it's a reordering of the priorities of our life, of understanding that actually, like, the people that I'm with in my actual life is where the kingdom has the potential to break in, and where God is actually at work in my life. So it's not that there aren't other influences of, I mean, yes, Washington, D.C. or Lansing or whatever is going to impact my life. It's not that it's not, but that's not really where I can make a difference. I can't make a difference outside of casting a ballot in either of those places, but I 100% for sure can make a difference in the schools that my kids go to, in the church that I'm a part of, in the neighborhood that I'm a part of, right? And so I mean, I don't know. For us, it's trying to get to know our neighbors. It's our kids have tons of friends in the neighborhood that are over all the time. Sometimes I walk into our backyard and there's like 15 kids back there, but like those are the opportunities to be like connected and a part of what God is doing presently in my community. And that's really hard, even in some senses, because again, Brandy was pointing to is life's busy, right? So even in that scenario, I go home sometimes, it's like, okay, I mean, I should probably go say hi and talk to them, but really I need to go write this thing or respond to this person or whatever, right? So I think evaluating your life and trying to figure out, what is God inviting you during the season to be more present in? And we all have responsibilities in other areas. So we can't, I can't sit down with every person I come across for 4 hours every day, but maybe there's somebody I'm supposed to do that with, or, it's just, I would want to use that for all of us, even as a part of our prayer life of God, where are you during this season? And maybe that's a helpful way of thinking about it. Where should I be present during this season? And that can ebb and flow. And that may look like, well, in this season, I'm helping in student ministries at church, or I'm actually more involved in my kids' school, or we're intentionally inviting these people over on Saturday mornings, or, so I wouldn't want to limit anyone, but I would want us to be intentional about that.
Yeah. And as you're thinking through things, as you're planning out calendars, I know our family sits down and we think through what's coming up in the next month, what's coming up in the next couple of months, what's coming up this week. That intentional process of just, all right, I know you're at work, Jesus. So where are you at work, and where are you inviting me to join you, and things you're already doing? Like, give me eyes to see that. Even in my calendar, where are you at work? And I know one thing I struggle with is margin. And I never plan margin, right? So I'll schedule meetings back to back because I'm like, I want to meet with this person. I've got, this 80-minute block of time, and I'll slot them into that time. But I don't give margin in case the meeting before that needs to go longer, right? Or if I see somebody as I'm walking from one meeting to the next, or, whatever it is, it's those moments of margin that I don't do a good enough job of scheduling that, but when I do, I just see the Spirit using it. Sometimes the Spirit just wants me to spend time with my Savior, and that's where the margin comes in. And sometimes it is those like unplanned encounters that a lot of us don't have time for unless we're intentional about it. So the last thing I want to talk about was just kind of connecting all of this to our 1-year goal as a church. So this is where I'm doing my job right now. Not to get too executive pastory on everybody, but seriously, how does all this tie into our 1-year goal, which is that everyone that calls Hopevale home would know their neighbors by name and by need? So how can we kind of draw a connection from all this amazing stuff we've been talking about to knowing our neighbors by name and by need?
Yeah, I mean, I think the shorthand is the Lamb is at work in your neighbor's life, and that is the place where you have the most opportunity to make an impact for the kingdom of God and their lives. As far as, most opportunity we have it in our own life would be the most opportunity, but secondary of like inviting others into that is, these are the people who you're going to have the most access to, influence with, who's going to be able to see your life the most in real ways, not in like fake social media ways where people live two different lives or versions of themselves or any of those sorts of things. And so I think if I were to kind of summarize what happened on Sunday, I felt like the response was, this feels like good news that we have been waiting for in a world that is filled with bad news and despair and brokenness. And so my encouragement would be that same news that you're getting to receive is exactly why we're imploring you to know your neighbor by name and by need, because they need it too. And whatever you have felt of the Spirit being at work in this series is the same thing he wants to be doing in their life, and you can be the catalyst to that.
That's really good. What do you think, Brandy?
Yeah, that's great. What came to mind was just that we vote by our lives. So
Yeah.
it's all connected, because it's by how we live, by how we love, how we give of our time and ourselves. And so, are our homes, or are we as people, or Hopevale itself, are we places where people can belong, even maybe before they believe, especially before they believe, just like me? But can I be a person that can, like you said, extend that good news and have a bigger vision of the kingdom of God being at work, and that we're all invited into it?
It's really good.
What as XP, what would you say?
I love the way you put it. I think the only
Great
thing I'd
XP
add,
answer.
the only thing I would add to it is, it doesn't matter what political sign is in their yard. It doesn't matter what they may have done historically to offend you. It doesn't matter what disagreements you may have had previously. The Lamb is at work in the lives of your neighbors. And we have opportunity to join Jesus in that work, or ignore that work, or sometimes work against that work. But if we all just approach life as, the Lamb is at work in the lives of my coworkers, the Lamb's at work in the lives of my kids, the Lamb's at work in the lives of my neighbors and my friends. If we start at that place, first of all, it's a statement of faith. I love it as a statement of faith. But then it's also this reorientation to reality of, the Lamb is at work. I want to join him in what he's doing. And I think that level sets everything and really sets us up to be instruments of peace and hope and love to those people that God has placed us with for a purpose. We're not in our neighborhood by chance.
Right.
Jesus put us there.
Yeah.
We're not in the workplace that we're in by chance. Jesus put us there, and he put us there with a purpose. So
Absolutely.
it's a great way to end. Thank you guys for sharing your
great
thoughts
to
and your
be here.
time. Thank you for joining us on the Hopevale podcast as we continue to wrestle through this reality of kingdom allegiance in a time where political divisions run really deep. We hope that this has been helpful to you. If it has been helpful, we'd encourage you to share it with maybe your friends and neighbors and family members. Encourage them to watch it as well. We're looking forward to seeing you this Sunday at church. No matter what happens with the election, we'll be gathered together and proclaiming the King that we worship, which is Jesus, and we hope that you'll join us. Thank you. Bye, everybody.